Hi, chickens. Welcome to another interview for Self Love September. I thought it'd be good to have another deep chat, and this time it is with my friend Jess, aka Stella Rain Dancer. And as you can see from the title, this one is about being self loving with parenthood and as a parent, and sort of matching up your role as a parent with the self love journey. This is something that I cannot speak to. As many of you know, I'm child free AF and I intend to remain that way. So I thought I need someone who I think of as very much in the mother archetype and very much like connected and committed to that role, and that I've spoken to about that role. And that's you, Jess. So thank you very much for being here, darling.
Oh my goodness, thank you for having me. This is such an honor and such a privilege, and I'm so excited to be here because talking about parenthood and, the intersection of it with self-love and my spiritual practice is a huge love of mine. So thank you.
It is, it's one of, I think when I think of you, the archetype that comes through most of all is the mother archetype and being the dedicated and conscientious mother. And it's something like we've talked about, it's come up on social media, it's something that you've talked about in videos, and it's just a way of me sort of, when you think of someone and you think of associations, archetypes, things that you know about them, I always think of you as being like the quintessential Queen of Cups, good mother archetype. And that made me think when I was thinking that's actually that can be quite pressurizing when somebody is viewed as being like very much in that archetype. It can be a lot of pressure, and I know that a lot of parents do feel a lot of pressure to play their roles perfectly and to play their roles to the hilt. How do you experience that kind of pressure, if you do, and how do you cope with it?
So I think the pressure to be like that quintessential, really good parent, good mom is definitely out there. But it can also be really affirming and it can be a good boost to the self-esteem when you hear that somebody else from the outside looks at you and says, "You look like you are this quintessential great mom. Good for you. Keep doing what you're doing." Like we all have our moments of doubt, and parenthood is like the number one role where you question yourself on so many levels on a daily basis. And it can be a really big struggle. There are days that I absolutely feel like other people are putting pressure on me um, to do things, or to like that society is just trying to get me to be a certain way, that I'm not allowed to have certain interests or activities, that I'm not allowed to participate in certain areas of society or have time for myself or other things like that. It can be very hard to deal with that. But I think I've come to the point now where, for the most part, day in, day out, I can keep myself in a good frame of mind of that. But that took work for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that you feel like you can't be interested in certain activities or do certain things. That's something that has come up a lot when I've talked to parents who are friends of mine, parents who are clients of mine. This idea that you've got to put certain childish things to bed, that if you're into certain spiritual things, you can't be into that anymore. If go out, if you went out before and did certain social things, a lot of my friends, for instance, that had children along the way felt like they couldn't party anymore. I've had friends that were into the BDSM community who felt like, well, what do I do now?
Yes.
I can't do that anymore. So there's a lots of dialogues like that happening, and shame around wanting to carry on being yourself and not just play
Yeah.
the parent role all the time.
Yeah. To me, the way that I look at it is that parenthood is one of the many hats that I wear. Just like within my parenting role, there are many hats that I wear. I'm counselor to them, I'm therapist, I'm nurse, I'm an actual practicing pharmacy technician in my real world job. So, like, medication and medical knowledge is something that I have a lot of knowledge in, and that definitely is something that I apply to my daily life now. But I'm also, their first teacher. I'm a playmate, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague in some ways. I have to teach them all of these skills that they're going to need to learn in the real world when they do eventually grow up and leave my house. And, trying to balance that with playing the mother role, but also enjoying the other aspects of my life that I enjoy, was something that I definitely have to still consciously remind myself of on a regular basis.
Mhm. Yeah. Otherwise, I think, especially for me personally, when I look at parenting and when I look at pressure and worries, I do see that there's a lot of things that are unique to, not unique to motherhood, but more specifically aligned with motherhood and the societal pressure that's placed onto mothers. And I often talk to mothers about the real importance of connecting with their soul and letting their children know what their soul is, rather than just connecting with the role and just, you know, shedding everything else away and saying, I don't get to do art anymore, I don't get to have fun anymore, I don't get to do those things, because there's a shame to that. And there's a comparison, I think, that is made between mothers who still try to keep their own identity and their own life. I think they would compare themselves sometimes negatively to mothers who actually have sacrificed everything on the altar of motherhood. Even though I've spoken to so many people who say, my mum did that and I wish she hadn't. My mum stopped doing art and she was a brilliant artist and I wish that she hadn't. My mum didn't let herself have her own life. She sacrificed everything for us and I would have rather seen her thrive. So lots of people grow up and say, I wish my mother hadn't sacrificed everything. And yet I think mothers who try to retain their own identity compare themselves to mothers who have been like, no, I'm wholesale just a mum now and that's it.
I think some people see the like super moms out there, especially from the advent of social media and mommy blogs and Instagram accounts and all that stuff. And they see these mothers who literally dedicate a huge portion of their lives to their kids alone. And they think that they should do that. And I remember reading in a parenting book one day that this mother was, I cannot remember the name of the book for the life of me, nor the author. I'm sorry. But it was, this woman was saying that, like, you know, she would take her baby, her toddler, out with her and her husband to go, like, go have a drink or go eat with friends or something at a restaurant. And people would look at her critically because, you know, it's like a 2-year-old who's asleep in her arms at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night as they're having drinks on a patio somewhere. But she was like, I had my child to fit into my life, not so that I could mold my life completely around these beings. And I think that that's okay. And I think it's healthy. And reading that was a huge, like, just it clicked a light bulb on in my head. And that's when I started doing a practice with my husband that we call taking our night. So once a week he has a night and once a week I have a night, and it can start from when that spouse gets home from work, or like we can go out for dinner on by ourselves if we want to, we can go watch a movie if we want, go out with friends, go do whatever, lock ourselves in the bedroom and write all evening if we just need to do that. But we don't have to stay home, we don't have to tend the kids, nobody has to, you don't have to bathe them, you don't have to put them to bed or read the stories. Whoever is home with them deals with that. And then you know, you get that time to be yourself, to do the things that you like, to catch up on some of the things that you want. And that has helped me not only as an introvert to kind of get that time to myself to collect my thoughts, but I've also noticed helped my husband, who's an extrovert, to be able to have that permission to go out and do things that he wants to do that I would not want to participate in with him. There's a movie he wants to see, and I'm just like, so not what I want to go spend my evening doing. You know, he can go find a friend to go do that with or do it on his own. And it really helps to keep us, keep our self identities alive as individuals. It helps to keep our marriage balanced. And our kids get to see us doing things that we love to do. And they recognize that mom and dad's time is sacred too, and that it's important as well. And I think that is immensely important for them.
Absolutely. I like that you're speaking on two levels. It's like the kids get to see you being an individual and understand that that is a part of you, that you're not just fitting into their life, playing a role in their life. You're a dynamic, multifaceted human being, but you're also saying that you and your other half, you know, attempt to do that with each other. You're trying not to just be in this complete synergy with each other and be rolled into one being just because you're parents of these kids. You also attempt to maintain your individuality as well. So there's like layers to the role of individuality, which I think is awesome. And one thing I wanted to ask about self-love in relation to your parenting journey is, did you have a self-love routine and a focus on self-love before your kids came along, or is this something that you had to grow into? Just to clarify for everybody, that you have got like an older stepchild, and then you've got you've got a 9-year-old, no, 15-year-old, 9-year-old, and 5-year-old. Yeah, there we go. That's right, isn't it? I thought I'd written their grades down instead of their ages. Then I was like, no, no. The grades are different where you are, and I wouldn't know them. So yeah, that's what's happening in the house, kids wise. And so, and how long have you been a part of the eldest one's life for now? Since they were how old?
So when Morgan, who's my stepdaughter, was 3, about a month shy of turning 4, that's when my husband and I started dating. So I've literally been in her life since she was a toddler and still toilet training. And then she started living with us full time when she was 7. So only about 3 years later. By that point, we had had my son, Andrew, and he's 9 now. And then a few years later came along Emily. So no, I didn't have a dedicated self love practice as to what I would define it now before I entered parenthood, probably because I wasn't a parent at all, step or, genetically, biologically, before my husband and I started dating. So I just kind of, at that point, I was single. I was still in my 20s, and I would go to work and then I would come home. I would do any jobs I needed to do around the house, and then my time was my own and I would spend it how I wanted to and however my budget or my feelings kind of drove me to. Um, and then it changed, obviously, quite a bit once Morgan came into my life. And then, when I think my husband and I had been together for about 9 or 10 months when we moved in together. And then few months later, I got pregnant with Andrew. So you know, self love started to become something that I really started to practice consciously when I was pregnant. I think it really, that physical embodiment of realizing that I'm growing a human in my body really made me realize that I needed to slow down and take care of myself a little bit. Um, and then I completely abandoned it when he was born. um, Partly that was because I was a new mom and he was a tiny little newborn who depended on me for absolutely everything, and I was nursing. And then part of it was also when he was 2 months old, I got acute appendicitis and ended up having to go in for an emergency surgery and have my appendix removed. And I think it dawned on me that I needed to build that self love practice back up when, at his 4 month vaccination appointment, I was sitting there and the nurse asked me about how he had reacted to his 2 month appointment. And I said, I don't know. I wasn't there for it. And she mommy shamed me. She was like, what the hell do you mean you weren't there for his appointment? You are his mother. You are a nursing mother. Where were you? And I just kind of took a deep breath before I decided to bite her head off. And I went, I was recovering in the hospital from an emergency appendectomy surgery, and I was strung out on morphine. And she went, oh, went, yeah. Yeah. I went off the pain medication early too because he didn't react well to formula. And so I was in a lot of pain for a few weeks after surgery. But I did it so that I could nurse him still and that I wouldn't lose my milk. And yeah, that she turned like just scarlet. She was so humiliated. And then yeah, that was when it dawned on me, like, if I hadn't been in the hospital recovering and caring for myself, then um, who would have cared for me at that point? Like I needed that time to do that for myself. And then after Andrew was after I recovered, basically, I really started to dedicate a little bit of time to self love again. And yeah, and that's really where I think that the light bulb went on for me.
Yeah, that is such a horrible experience, but it makes me think about how the experience happened and led you to this realization, like, okay, you don't get to just self-love during pregnancy and then drop it as soon as the baby's born. You need to keep going. But it also will have been a massive wake-up call for that nurse, that nurse will never again be so, because it's such a narrow thing to think, oh, there must be some reason that's to do with neglect and to do with laziness or to do with not caring. It could have been anything. Somebody could have died. There could have been any kind of an emergency. Of course, any number of different illnesses. You could have been mentally not okay. I mean, which of course also is a form of illness. So it's like, how
Hmm.
the nurse really, it's almost like, and this is something that I will say about parent shaming and mummy shaming, and I would love anyone to comment down below if you've been shamed and how, and if anything similar has happened to you where someone has jumped the gun and made this really quick assumption. A lot of it is wanting to. It's really strange. It's like somebody really wants to assume the worst of a parent. And I notice that often. I notice, for instance, that when children are really crying or tantruming in public, there'll always be somebody walk past and just look up and down the nose at the parent, or tut, or say that child's behaving disgracefully, not thinking for a second that child could be overtired, they could be unwell, they could be neurodivergent, they could be, anything could be happening, but they really want to make the judgment first. It's like, oh, disgusting parenting. That really needs to be sorted out. And I'm sure as I'm talking that you're probably thinking, yeah, I have totally felt myself in public being judged because my child was having a difficult time. And instead of, I'm sure there were other people thinking, oh my God, bless that parent, I've been there. But a lot of people, even if they are parents, they very quickly forget what that's like, and they are very judgy and they put that energy across. I felt it myself.
Yeah, I have a friend who's got a child who's very severely autistic, who she actually couldn't take him out of the house for a couple of years because he would just completely freak out. The stimulus literally made him go off the charts. And one day she couldn't avoid it. She absolutely had to take him into like Walmart or something like that. And another mother, leading a similarly aged child by the hand, absolutely like railed against her in public, like was saying like, it's disgraceful how you can't even keep your child under control. And she's like, he's autistic, he is completely overstimulated, I didn't have babysitting, I had to get this, what do you want me to do? And then the mother like basically said, autism is a lie, you are just making this up, this is just an excuse. And I remember consoling my friend, just being like, just with those types of people, just fuck them, like just fuck them, because that's that's just horrendous, it's absolutely horrendous, and I've been on both ends of people shaming me in public for my children not behaving properly. But then I've also been on the receiving end of kindness. My When Andrew was 2 and or 3 or whatever, how old he was when Emily was born, he was 4. Oh my gosh, he was 4. I had a lady offer to take Emily from my hands for a moment in the grocery store because Andrew was literally on the ground having a screaming, kicking temper tantrum, and I actually handed her my baby and
Mhm.
dealt with my son. And I have tried to make sure to offer parents, not during a pandemic, I've tried to offer other parents similar types of support or consolation, or at least looks of empathy when I see their own children doing that, because I've been there and I've tried so hard to not leap to those judgments. They're still there. Sometimes you look at them and you just think like, oh my God, this mother is way more interested in her cell phone than she is in her kid. But at the same time, you don't know if she's answering a really important text message, like if her boss has just sent her a message saying, hey, don't worry, you don't have to come in, I know your child is sick or whatever. Like, you don't know. And so I try to keep my nose out of it,
Yeah.
basically, is what it comes down to. And I just try to support my other fellow mothers whenever I can.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's good for us to look at our willingness and our apparent unconscious desire to think the worst very quickly, and just think about, you know what, okay, maybe it is that, maybe it's not that, but I know sure as shit that people have assumed the worst about my parenting and they had gotten it wrong. They got it wrong. They shamed me, and they totally didn't have access to all of the information. And I don't want to then pass that energy on. And for me, as someone that has no interest in having my own children, I have very often also been that person, not during a pandemic, calm down, everyone. But yeah, totally. I've been that person who's taken a kid, held a kid, or kids have been interested in what I'm wearing or whatever. And the mum has been completely stressed. And I've been like, here you go, you can play with this.
Yeah.
So, and I love the opportunity to do that for someone who's really sort of like tired, overwhelmed, strung out, maybe worried about judgments, especially if it's their first child. I'm very like aware that that kind of thing is something I would find really difficult if I had children, and so I always try to be the person that's making something easier. And one thing that's come up as you've been talking about the judgments and the kind of assumptions that people make, I'm just wondering, for people watching, thinking about their own journey of self-love with parenthood, would you say that it's healthy to not justify? So for example, in the case of your friend, when they explained, which I don't blame them at all, my instinct would be to be like, my child is autistic, this is the situation. But of course that person came back and was like, autism isn't even real. There was obviously just this really strong desire to be on the attack. Would you say, if you possibly can, don't give justification? It's not, it sometimes it's giving energy to a place where it's not going to be warranted? Or would you say it depends on the situation?
I think it completely depends on the situation. I think that my friend looked at this person holding a child of a similar age by the hand and genuinely thought that this would be a person who would receive this information in a compassionate manner, would be like, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. And then would have maybe had that check with themselves, be like, I shouldn't get involved in other people's things like this again. I think that if you feel like giving the explanation is something that's worth the time and the energy, go for it. I have certainly justified myself at times. When Andrew's had a meltdown when he's a toddler and someone looks at me and I'm like, I'm sorry. He is so sick right now. He is so tired. I just need to get him his medicine so we can go home and he can rest. And I've seen the compassion return to that person's face. You can see that they've had a moment to be like, yep, I have definitely been taking my brain to a place where I shouldn't have. They give you that reassuring look. I've had other times where I've tried to justify it and I've basically found that I've just been wasting my precious energy on trying to change somebody's mind who it's already made up and it's not going to change. For me, if I find I'm wasting my time with someone, I drop it right then and there. At that point, I have no vested interest in giving you any more of my time. My child is the one that matters in this situation. I'm the one who matters in this situation, not them. Um, but sometimes there's that human moment where you just want to reach out to another person and connect with them and share your distress and get that comfort back in return. And I think that that is absolutely okay to have those moments, to turn to your fellow man and be like, fuck, I'm having a time. And, to get that reassuring smile or whatever it is. And I think that's okay. And I think it's healthy. And, if you have one of those moments and the person rejects your reach out, you are not obligated at all to continue to have that conversation with them. You're not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, you feel into it, don't you? And you know when that's enough energy expended, and actually, you know what, I'm going to bring it back to me and what I need to do, what the next action is for me that's right. And it's certainly not trying to get you on board with what's happening with my situation, because if you're not gonna give me some empathy now, you're not going to give me some empathy ever. So that will have to be your work to do, basically. And that's probably how I'd see it as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about being time poor, because whenever I talk to parents about self-love in relation to the way that they are with their children and the routine they have with their children, being time poor and feeling like they don't have enough time for so many of the things that are suggested for the self-love journey, that comes up. It certainly comes up for parents who are partnered with somebody, but of course it definitely comes up for single parents as well. And I feel like a lot of the things that people enjoy doing, like the creative journey, the spiritual journey, that kind of thing, a lot of sort of like self-care, physical self-care techniques, working out. Of course, I know that parenthood requires some compromises on time and scheduling clashes. But have you ever felt like desperately time poor? And what would you say to people who just literally feel like they have no time for anything apart from parenting?
So I think being time poor is definitely something that our modern society deals with more now because especially during COVID-19, we are so isolated in our own homes without access to like support for things like childcare, daycare services. Some countries kids can't be sent to school right now. There's single parenting situations. Absolutely. One of my best friends is a single mom of two. And so I know very intimately from talking with her the difficulties of not having time to do things. But then there's also the situations where we look back at how we've spent our day, and if some of what you've done is like maybe you've scrolled Facebook or Instagram or played phone games while your child's been watching TV, you can also take a step back and really look at how you're spending your time, and if there's ways that you can kind of reclaim some of that for yourself. Can you double up something with your child? Can you maybe do some yoga on a DVD while they kind of like half climb on you while you do it? Like, the time poor is absolutely a thing, but some of it I think comes from needing to reframe in a lot of situations. And then the other, I think, is just learning how to maximize on those little moments of time. Keeping a book in the bathroom so that you can get a page in while you pee. Um, uh, putting right, like putting an audiobook or a podcast on while you're in the car so that you can listen to that instead of music while you take your kids to and from school or daycare or dad's house or wherever the case may be. um, I also look for any excuse for my kids to contribute to the household, not only because time poor but also because future adults future will need to be independent adults. And so, there's definitely times when I get my kids to help me with even just little silly things like, here, go put this in the dishwasher for me, or, you know, litter boxes or sweeping a room or something like that. What I would say to those parents who are like so desperately time poor, working multiple jobs, that kind of thing, is figure out those times of transition and see if you can streamline some of them so that you can give yourself even an extra couple of minutes. Can you have a lunch and an outfit packed and ready to go the night before? Can you, like if you take the bus, can you do half your makeup at home and then half of it on the bus on your way to work or wherever? What are little things that you can do to kind of give yourself back that gift of time? Or, if you take the bus, you get ready before and maybe you take something enjoyable to do just for you, read a book or listen to a podcast or something on that bus or public transport. There's a lot of ways that we can find those little gifts of time. And even when it comes to spirituality, if I've taken my kids to the park, um, because I have the older child who can kind of help me watch the kids a little bit, I might say, hey, I'm going to take 5 minutes and sit at the base of this tree and just close my eyes and breathe. Please make sure the other two don't run out into the road and get hit by a car. Pretty please. But if you don't have that, can you turn a walk in the neighborhood into a semi-spiritual thing with them? I have a little song that I sing with my kids where we sing, going on a nature walk, a nature walk, a nature walk, going on a nature walk to see what we can see. And then we'll use each of the other four senses. So we'll look at trees, we'll look at seasons, we'll look at smells, and if there is something safe that's edible, we've tried dandelion, we've tried pansies, we've tasted rose petals. The kids have tried a blade of grass. um,
Little
Sometimes it's imagining what something would taste like. Um, and, like roses smell like they would taste sweet, but they probably really don't. But wouldn't it be cool if they tasted sweet or something like that? And, it allows me to kind of connect in with nature. It allows me to connect in with nature. It gets them tuned in with time with me and in the moment and with that mindfulness. But it's also a good break from screen time and technology and all of that kind of stuff and worries and cares.
Yeah, great memories as well that are made from that. Like those kinds of memories last an absolute lifetime where you're like, wow, and that it's like you tell other people that you have a memory like that and they're like, what? I never did anything like that. So it's like it can be quite unique because other people just
Mm-hmm.
will, a lot of parents don't think to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like what you said about doubling up, and I know a lot of people that double up, they do their art while they encourage the kids to do their art, things like
Yes.
that. The
Yeah.
other thing I would say that I find really interesting is like, I love what you said about your kids being future adults, and also, needing to for reasons of being time poor, as well as for reasons of needing to train them to be independent. Then the chores have got to be done. And I also feel like some parents really pressure themselves to always have all the chores done and to be on top of all the chores, and they lose out on a lot of quality time doing things that would bring them more well-being and more joy, through being like, oh well, but the dishes aren't done, or I haven't done the hoovering, or this isn't done, or I need to, fix this. And I'm like, yeah, but do you though? Do you?
Yeah,
Because if you have children in the house, then all the chores are really just shoveling while it's still snowing, shoveling the path while it's still snowing. Of course, we need to shovel the path sometimes, but does it always need to be clean considering it is still snowing? You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I love that analogy. I love that. And like for me, I ask myself, do my kids really need that extra 15 minutes playing video games? Or is it better for them? Yes, if there's some whining and some moaning and groaning and complaining along the way, is it better for them to have taken a minute to, have helped me to make dinner or to put some groceries away or other things like that? And I think for especially for my oldest, she's 15 now, she's going to be 16 in a few months. And then in just a few years, we're looking at her moving out and, maybe moving in with friends, getting a place of her own. I don't know. She's going to need to know how to do the laundry, sweep and vacuum the floor. She's going to need to know how to cook for herself. Like these are life lessons as well as time savers and stress savers for me. And the fact is, when it comes down to it, when caregivers are cared for themselves, when they take care of themselves, when they have other people do nice things and care for them, they can better give back to the people around them. When I am crabby and stressed out because I have a whole house to clean and my daughter is just making her room a bigger mess, that doesn't make me a better mom to her in that moment when she's, screaming at me or if I'm screaming at her. Those are the moments I look back on and go, why did I do that? But if I'm getting the other kids to help me out cleaning up the and of their own rooms after, not only have they given back to me and they feel good about that, I've given back to them, I felt good about that, but we're all significantly less stressed. There's time for us to do things one on one or as a family after that there isn't time for if we're arguing. And it, all in all, everybody feels better for it. And I think that that is something that a lot of parents just forget about is that everybody, like we make everybody else feel better when we're able to contribute to different situations from a better frame of mind, so, and a better state of being.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. When it comes to teaching your kids self-love, because obviously I'm sure that's something that you want them to understand can be a part of their routine and a part of their lives as well. Obviously, Morgan being 15, I guess you can go into more nuance with that. And then you've got the 9-year-old and the 5-year-old. So they're all at different stages of understanding what it means, and it can be an abstract concept until it's not anymore. Do you have different ways of explaining it to each of them, and is it based on their personalities and different things that they would consider to be self-loving from their perspective, or how does it work?
Yeah, I would definitely say it changes a little bit with every child. A part of it changes just from experience from having one child going down to the next. You learn how to save time, you learn how to explain things better. When Morgan was Emily's age, I explained things like a overly worded adult. Now to Emily, I can explain things in a few words so much more efficiently and effectively for her age. So part of it's just a learning experience. Um, Both my girls are extroverted, and then my son is, I would say, kind of 50-50. He definitely has his major introvert moments. And when I see him getting really frustrated with things, the way I talk to him about how he can take care of himself is a completely different set of strategies than I give my girls. My girls, when they are really stressed out and they're out of it, it is how can we get you some interaction that'll be uplifting and will be confidence building? Where with my son, it almost always ends up needing to be what kind of activity or situation can we put you in where you are by yourself or with very limited people so that you can recharge. So when I see my son being really down on himself, I'll maybe suggest that he read a book or that he build some Lego or do something that he's really good at, because that individual activity will give him the chance to let his mind still and calm. He'll get that chance to breathe more deeply, and the rational thoughts will come back. Whereas with my oldest, especially, she is so social and extroverted. She really doesn't like spending much time on her own at all. For her, it's always a suggestion of, why don't you call your mom? Or, you haven't visited your mom's dad, your grandpa, in a long time. Maybe we can get you over there for the weekend. How about you give him a call and see what he'd think? Or something along those lines. Because getting her to be involved with other people is almost always what she needs to, to start choosing better actions and more self-loving actions. With Emily being 5, at that age, they're still very self-interested, and not in a bad way. It's just because that's how they are. So with her, I don't struggle so much with talking to her about self-love, except maybe just like paying attention to how her actions impact other people. And I pay more attention to making her aware of her body. Like, hey, I see you dancing around a lot right now. I know you really want to play, but your body is telling you I really need to pee. So let's go deal with that.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
for At Emily's age, that's the most self-loving thing I can get her to do, is to sit down and eat, stay in her bed so she can sleep, and go to the bathroom when she needs to.
Mhm.
That's self-love for a 5-year-old effectively.
Yeah, totally. And you've reminded me so much of flashbacks of, I used to really not want to go for a wee when I was watching cartoons or a film or something that I was really enjoying. And I would like literally like sit there like that. And my mum would be like, "Do you need a wee?" And I'd be like, "No." And she'd be like, "Yes, you do." And sometimes it would be something that I knew I'd seen a million times before and I knew I could pause it. My mum's like, "You could pause it." And I'm like, "No, it's the Mad Hatter's tea party. Don't touch it. I'm
I know.
fine." Oh god, yeah, no, that was definitely me all over. It's really interesting from my perspective as someone that I'm not very good with developmental stages. So I still to this day am like, what can they do at that age? Can they do this and that? And they're like, yeah, they can do that by 3. And I'm like, eh? And then other things I'm like, oh, they can totally do that, right? And they're like, no, they don't usually get to do that till they're about 9 or 10. And I'm like, eh? I don't know why I don't just learn. But it always seems to surprise me. So that's very interesting for me to think that, like, yeah, okay, there's so much difference between 5 and 9. Like, that really at the age of 5,
Huge.
you're teaching a kid to be embodied, basically, to remember that they're in a meat suit.
Yeah. And like 2 days ago, my 5-year-old meat suit fell off backwards off the edge of the trampoline, and she fractured her left collarbone.
Oh no, oh no, I'm so sorry.
Like,
That's
so this is like 3 or 4 hours after her kindergarten like interview with her teacher. She's all happy and dandy to start school the next day, which is yesterday. Ended up in the ER later that night, and she's now going to school with a sling on.
oh,
Like but hey, she's learned to zip the net of the trampoline now. She'll never forget that.
exactly, yeah. Sometimes some lessons are tougher than others, and if she didn't feel like she was in a meat suit before, she knows it now.
Yep.
Bless her. Oh my god,
Yep.
that did you freak out? Like, what happens when something? I guess it depends on the situation, but how were you?
At this point, I'm fine. My son has been, his nickname from the time that he was about 1 was Accident Prone Andrew. So yeah, like I swear to God, I should have gotten frequent flyer miles from having to go to the ER with that kid. He was susceptible to upper respiratory infections from like 1 to 2. Then at 2, he broke the 2 fingers on his little finger bones when
Mm,
Morgan slammed his fingers in the bathroom door by accident. Um, he had stitches at 3, 2.5, 3. He
mhm.
had his 2 front teeth pulled from 2 separate injury incidents. Yeah,
You
Emily's had
don't pray
stitches
too.
twice.
Oh
Yeah,
my god.
Emily's had stitches twice, both in her chin. um, when Andrew got stitches, he fell off something and bumped his head, and he's got a little blood in his head. I'm like, oh yeah, it's just a little scrape, pat, pat, pat with some tissue, pulled away, and it's like, huh,
Oh god.
I can see your skull.
This is the thing though, when you say that, this is the thing that I always say about like there's so many reasons why I've chosen not chosen the parenthood path. And they're not, it's not all like, well, I'd be bad at it for this, that, and the other reason. But
Yeah.
I've always had, I think, a very keen awareness of what I would be bad at with parenting. People always say, you'd be a great mom, you'd be a great parent. I don't really doubt that in some regards, but I've
Mhm.
always known keenly what I'd be shit at. And I always say I would be so overprotective when I'm in the, literally, I remember a few times in my life, strong memories of seeing a kid walking along a wall and going too high along the wall, and the parent's not looking, or the parent is like sort of turned away, and it's like they're my baby. I go in and I'm like, oh, be careful.
Yeah.
And if I see a kid going too close to the road, I'm literally that one that's like, I'm like their weird auntie that's actually a stranger. I'm like, oh, careful, darling. And
Yeah.
I know that I'd be too overprotective. You have to let children run around and play and get hurt and learn and scrape their knee and fall out of a tree and all that jazz. And I wouldn't do that. And I wouldn't let them out until they were like 20. I'd be like, don't talk to strangers. Stay here, and I'll teach you how to make jam. You don't need to go out there. There's nothing for you out there. I would definitely be like that. And it's making me wonder, did you know before you got into all of this or did you start to figure it out quite soon, what you would be good at and what you would be bad at? And did you accept that, or did you beat yourself up about it?
I mean, I think there were some things I had preconceived notions of that I would be good or bad at. I really did think I would be so much more like that kitchen witch mom, like making everything from scratch and there with like the baby like bullet blender making all my baby food. I wasn't that mom. I in some ways I still would aspire to be that mom if I was actively choosing to continue to have children. But I'm not. I insist on my children eating a certain amount of fresh fruit and veg every day. I limit intake of juice and sugar and other crap that they don't need. But I'm not the everything is organic and all that kind of stuff, uber healthy mom. I thought I was going to be, I wasn't. Um, I guess I felt prepared in terms of like physical injuries because not only am I the oldest of three, so I watched both my brothers get injured and I helped to deal with them. I got injured a lot myself as a kid. I was a rough and tumble tomboy. I had a broken bone. I had multiple scrapes, bruised bones, all sorts of stuff. Um, and I had taken first aid. I'd already been trained as a pharmacy assistant, so there was a lot of medical stuff that I was familiar and comfortable with. My biggest fear, like when I was pregnant, was that I wasn't going to be able to breastfeed, that I was not going to be able to figure out nursing, and that I was going to have to bottle feed my kids, and I didn't want to have to be up. Like one of the whole reasons I wanted to breastfeed was that I wouldn't have to prepare a bunch of food. It would just be like, oh, we're out and about, you're hungry, slap them on the boob and keep walking, right?
That's a
And
self-loving reason to want to nurse as well.
there that is, and like I took my kids to bed with me and I nursed them in bed and we would fall asleep both during the nursing process. I'd wake up an hour later and my tit would be out and I'd be like, oh, I'll just cover that back up, roll back over, go back to sleep and be fine with that. But like, yeah, I was terrified I wasn't going to be able to nurse. um I guess I was terrified that I wouldn't know what to do sometimes, like when they were crying, that I would just like freeze. And I guess the big thing that just overtook all of my senses as a new mom was just learning how to navigate it. Now that my kids are a bit older and my older two are much more independent, obviously, with their ages being what they are. Now my biggest fear is making sure they don't get pregnant too early, that they don't like grow up to be career criminals or get addicted to drugs, that they make good choices. And my biggest fear is that they will become Republicans. um,
Well, I was like, as we were talking through it, I was like, this is so relatable. This is so real. You know, we're talking about drugs, we're talking about teen pregnancy. Like, yes. And then and I think for a lot of people, it's like, and that's also relatable. Yes, that's a concern.
like
That's really funny.
my biggest thing is that I want my kids to learn how to be good, accepting citizens of other of other people. I want them to learn respect for others. I want them to have compassion. I want them to know how important it is to vote. I want them to know how important it is that they accept people of other sexualities and colors and creeds and religions and cultures. Like, to me, that is the biggest thing that I think I'm the most scared of, because I actually, one of my best friends, her teenager, he's like basically effectively an adult now. He ran away from home 2 years ago after clashing with his mom and his stepdad, mostly over political and sexual identity stuff, and still clashes with them in a big way, and has continued to make a lot of really unhealthy choices for himself, as well as some really, I think, quite ignorant choices about his fellow man based on a lot of things. And I know how hard it's been for her to see that. She's got a lesbian binary daughter, his biological sister, and he has a step trans brother, I guess, is going from brother to sister or sister to brother. I don't remember. I don't know this family, that his other half of the family. And like, his political ideals have changed completely, and they didn't raise him like that at all. They didn't.
You judging then these other members of the family and being cruel towards them for their choices and their beingness.
Or just like, not even necessarily like outwardly being cruel, but just not really being there for them at all and
Mm.
stuff. And so, yeah, for me, it's been really important to try to instill those ideas in my kids. I'm like, I tell most people I'm bisexual. Really, the most effective label for me would be pansexual, because I just don't really give a crap about gender. But like, my oldest has established that she is almost certainly bisexual and probably leans much more towards the female spectrum than the male. And her best friend, as I said, is this lesbian, non binary person with a girlfriend. And, like, I took my kids to a Black Lives Matter march earlier after George Floyd was fatally shot. And I thought that that was really important to show my kids that, and, maybe not necessarily the type of systemic racism being built into the system in Canada, but certainly down in the States. And it's important to be aware of that and to see what you can do, and to
Mm.
show your support for other people who are marginalized, and other things like that. And yeah, I think
Mm.
that's my biggest fear right now, is that my kids will grow up to be very ignorant about those things and not accepting and understanding. And I would have a very, very hard time with that.
Yeah, you tapped me in actually to another thing that I've often said to people, which is that I would struggle if my kids grew up to have certain beliefs that I would say to them, where did you get this from? I did not raise you that way. I did not raise you to judge people based on those factors. I did not raise you to reject people based on these things. Where did this come from? Knowing that I would not be their only influence, and nor should I want to be their only influence, but it's very difficult not to want to be when some influences are so heinous and would leave me feeling so alienated from my children. That would be very difficult. And I have said before that I'm not sure if I'd fully trust myself. I'd have to find a way. But in the past, I've said I don't fully trust myself not to be so upset and so ashamed that my children started to feel this way and think this way, completely against anything I taught them about what I think it means to be a decent human being in the world, that I don't know if I would start to behave the way I shouldn't behave as a mother. I would like to be able to say that I'd be able to turn to my kids and say, I love you and I want to respect who you are. But I would say probably we don't talk about that kind of thing in my household. You know my point of view. I know your point of view. Let's drop it and leave it at that. Otherwise, there are going to be bigger problems. And there are certainly things that I do not talk about with members of my family that, like, long ago we decided, you know what, let's put a pin in it. You know where I stand. I know where you stand, and nothing good can come of picking the meat off this bone, right? Um,
Exactly.
and so I would like to believe that I could be like that, but like you said, I would also feel this is very, very hard. I really didn't want you to grow up feeling these things that I feel are just so, so unfortunate and so cold and so judgmental. Yeah, I would find that really difficult for sure, definitely. Um, so I wanted to ask about and I know like some people, when I ask people about this in my life and stuff, obviously some people really can go into it deeply, other people not so much, and I understand why. But obviously when people decide that they're going on a parenthood journey, or they find out they're going on a parenthood journey, they very much like look at their own parenting that they experienced, they look at their upbringing, and they figure out what it is they want to emulate and what it is they definitely want to leave by the side of the road. They do not want to carry on with that cycle. And I think that's how a lot of people discover that they are cycle breakers, is when they take on the parenting role and they're like, you know what, that shit dies with me. I went through it, but I'm not putting them through it. Would you say that you had things from your upbringing that you very much wanted to emulate and you've kept, and then also things that you were like, and not that, thank you very much?
Yep, definitely. Like my mom and I have had off and on tumultuous relationship even as adults. For the most part, we get along. There are some areas where we very much diverge in our ways of thinking. One of my big things as a kid was I loved to have one-on-one time with my parents, especially my dad, because he would work like 12, 14-hour days. And so I wanted to spend time with him, and we didn't have a lot of crossover interests. Um, my mom was home for a good portion of my childhood and teenagerhood. She did do some schooling and things like that, went back to school. She did work part-time when we were a bit older, but like when she was home, often she'd be in her bedroom with the door like mostly closed, watching TV or doing her own thing. And we didn't really have the open invitation to just come like sit down with her and hang out and watch the show with her or have a little chat or whatever. And when I would ask for hugs or time with them, like games or other things like that, the answer was almost always no, or the hug would be really quick and brief, and then it would just be over. And I would often feel like I needed more, probably because I wasn't popular in school. So I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't get a lot of like compassion and empathy from my school peers. So I wanted it when I came home. And my mom wanted me to toughen up. And she wanted me to learn how to build some of that tougher outer skin and to be able to not be so affected by the world around me. And I think that she honestly thought that she was doing the right thing for me when she would push me away faster. That had the complete opposite effect with me. So I ended up becoming a very big proponent when my babies were babies of attachment parenting. So I pretty much did not put my kids down unless I absolutely had to. There would be times I'd be nursing my babies and I'd be like, I need to go to the bathroom. And I would still bring the baby with me and go to the bathroom. Like most women would have finished and then put the baby in the crib or something and then walked away. I didn't always do that. And often, even when they'd just be sleeping during the day, I'd have them in my arms or I'd be baby wearing and things like that. I really wanted to have close contact with my kids a lot. And I struggled with both of them when they got to the point where they didn't want mommy hugs so much anymore. And I'm the type of person now who's like, my kids want a hug. All right, you come get a hug. You know, maybe there's the odd time I have to push them away, like if they've just done something really wrong and I need a few minutes to collect myself. But there's very few times when I tell my kids no, or I have to end a hug before they want it to end, because I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of that. And that often destroyed me from the inside. And I don't want to do that to my kids. I don't. But there's a lot of things I did want to emulate from my childhood too, like our summers at our family cabins and going to spend a lot of time just outside, no TV, no radio even. There was radio, but it pretty much only picked up the country station. And um,
That was so well acted. I thought you actually were just going to vomit there, and I was like,
yeah,
"You're not, are you?" No, no, that's fair enough. I do like some country, but it's definitely my least loved genre. But
yeah.
I love the fact that you got the no technology memories and you wanted to emulate that.
And we still do that. I make my kids unplug and disconnect on a regular basis. I sometimes feel like I have to surgically remove the phone from Morgan's hand at times, but I
Yeah,
make her do it.
yeah,
I think that there is a certain amount to be said as well for seeing where your kids really struggle and what their weaknesses are and where you can make them work on it, and tell them that their weaknesses doesn't mean that they get to just use it as an excuse to hit pass on everything for the rest of their life in terms of that, but it's an opportunity for growth and improvement. Um, my oldest daughter very much hates me for that right now, because reading is her weakest point, because she's kind of mildly dyslexic and dysgraphic. And I am making her read some lower reading level, like full on novels, because I want her to strengthen it. And she's not going to do it on her own.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's awesome. And I think so many people listening to this will think, God, I really wish that I'd had that, because so many people do have those things, like the parts where there is a difficulty, where there is difficulties understanding or difficulties progressing and they're behind. They didn't have a parent that was there that was like, I identify that and I'm going to give you this extra stuff to do. And let's really focus on out of the classroom setting, or when you're with me, what we can be looking at to make you to help you to thrive. There's so many people that weren't parented in that very conscientious way, and actually have broken the cycle by deciding to parent more conscientiously. So that's a really awesome thing to think on. This has been really, really fucking interesting. Like I was really intrigued by some of your answers, and I was very excited to know what you would answer. But even I didn't know I'd be as into this conversation as I am. I have literally got so much to think about now and so much to chew on about my own upbringing and how I feel about parenting and how I feel about just how children are raised and their perceptions of the world. So this has just been so interesting, aside from the conversation as well that we've had about parenting and self-love, which to me, I just feel like there are so many people that struggle with that. So thank you for talking about how you implement it and how you teach your children self-love as well. This has all been so fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me.
You're so welcome. It's been such a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much, darling. I'm excited and I want to read everybody's comments. I want all of the parents to get involved and I want all the child-free people to get involved too. Let's
And
have
if
a
anyone
conversation
has a question
about
for
it.
me, throw it down in the comments below this video. I promise I'll check back from time to time and breeze through them and see if there's anything that anyone's asking me.
I'm going to leave all the links to all of your stuff everywhere where people can find you online. Is there anything that you want to let people know that you are doing or that they can expect from you, or anywhere that you want to make sure that they do visit you?
I think the places I hang out the most are on my Facebook page and on Instagram, as well as on my YouTube channel as well. And I've actually made self-love September content in the past couple of years that I put up on my own channel, specifically directed at parents. So, and a lot of those are like specific activities or things that you can do to implement into your own parenting to really boost your self-love practice. So if anyone is feeling like there weren't enough like practical ideas in this video, don't worry, there's more. um, and I think, yeah, I think my biggest takeaway message right now would just be to tell people my biggest philosophy when it comes to parenting is a little bit of the Ms. Frizzle philosophy. Don't be afraid to take risks, make mistakes, and get messy.
I love that. I love that. And I will leave links down below specifically to the videos that you're referencing as well that you've done previously about self-love and parenting. So I'll definitely make it as easy as possible for people to click on them as well. Okay, this has been it. And thank you so much for joining us for this deep chat, darlings. I'll be back soon with more self-love September content. Bye for now.